Chapter 486. The heart-killing sword submits of its own accord. It was a magnificent spectacle in the Sword Suppression Valley, where thousands upon thousands of swords cried in unison and shook the heavens. Upon witnessing this scene, all the sword principal experts in the valley were astounded. The present scene was, in fact, a few shades greater than the previous one in which the sword caused 1,000 sword salute. And right at this moment, buzz! A shrilling sword echo abruptly sounded with extreme resonance. As it sounded, it easily drowned out all other noises in the valley. At the same time, the thousands of weapons which encircled the soul phantom and had just been crying in unison quickly died down and became silent. Within the entire valley, the only remaining noise was the resonant sword echo. What? Standing among the crowd with his hands on his back, Su Ming, who always had a clear and handsome look, suddenly shifted countenance. Horror, too, appeared on the faces of every sword principal expert as they turned their eyes toward the source of the sword echo. Astonishingly, the sword echo had originated from the deep pit in the mountain. .bg container 63275 CC1F display, flex direction, column align items, center justify content, center Z index, 214-748-3647. Important, and within that deep pit was only one weapon, which was none other than the heart-killing sword. Swish! A beam of bloody light shot up from the bottom of the pit, instantly triggering a suppressive force from a powerful restriction in the mountainside. Sword Suppression Valley had always been a place intended for the suppression of the heart-killing sword. There was a powerful restriction present in the mountainside where the sword was at. Whenever the sword acted up, the restriction would automatically initiate suppression. But this time, the heart-killing sword lashed fiercely and directly toward the restriction. Its blood-colored sword edge exerted unprecedented power as it viciously stabbed the restriction with irresistible force. For a while, the powerful restriction shook as if it was on the verge of breaking down. This is bad. As one of the 9 sovereigns, it was surprising that the dignified Master Su Ming would let out an exclamation at this very moment. His white garments flapped in the air as he rushed toward the restriction and tried in vain to control the restriction such that it would suppress the heart-killing sword. It was obvious that he had underestimated the power of the heart-killing sword. Or, to put it another way, what he underestimated was the sword's determination and eagerness to break the restriction. He had seen the restriction being perforated by the sword before he reached close to it, on which abruptly appeared an extremely hair-like yet fatal opening. Crack! The opening abruptly grew bigger. The restriction would ultimately be ruptured by the heart-killing sword. Swish! After breaking the restriction, the sword let out an excited howl and transformed into a bloody light which instantly shot through the void. Unexpectedly, it headed toward the 180 feet tall golden sword soul phantom, joining the other thousands of weapons. In all its demonic and seductive blood color, it appeared in front of the sword soul phantom, jumping up and down in tremendous excitement. The sword principal experts around were flabbergasted by the sight of this. From the secret chamber, Jian Wushuang too witnessed the 1,000-sword applause and saw the heart-killing sword. This heart-killing sword. Frowning slightly, a strange feeling popped up in the bottom of his heart, and he then gestured toward the sword. Although the gesture was a subconscious action, what he did not expect was that, in immediate reaction to it, the sword would let an exclamation and whiz toward him before floating with an unprecedented politeness in front of him. Its posture was like that of a young child in front of his parents. Such good manners. Is this really the heart-killing sword? Jian Wushuang was somewhat baffled. It should be known that the heart-killing sword was the Divine Land's first sword principal magic weapon, and it was also murderous in nature. A murderous magic weapon of its level should be extremely ruthless, brutal, and supercilious, as could be told from the scene of the 1,000-sword salute some time ago. But now, it behaved politely in front of him. He slowly reached his hand out and grasped its hilt, to which it showed no resistance and even became delighted. Shortly after, he began the dripping of blood to bind it to himself. The binding process went through smoothly. In only a moment's time, the binding was complete. Jian Wushuang had, impressively, become the first owner of a murderous sword principal magic weapon in the Divine Land. This is a bit too easy, isn't it? Jian Wushuang muttered in surprise. He knew in his heart that the heart-killing sword had come because of the golden sword soul he metamorphosized. Shaking his head, he did not think any more about it. As soon as his thoughts changed, the 180 feet tall golden sword soul phantom behind him began to slowly dissipate, while the thousands of weapons suspended in the air also receded one after another. Everything became calm once again. The entire sword suppression valley fell into a deathly silence. There remained a trace of consternation in the eyes of the sword principal experts, who could not calm down even as time passed. Everyone's eyes were currently fixated upon the inside of the secret chamber. They were all curious whether the monster who caused everything that just happened had 3 heads and 6 arms. The door of the secret chamber bolted open under the watch of everyone, and a figure in black robes slowly stepped out shortly after. He was not tall in stature and had a youthful face which was decent-looking, much as it absolutely could not compare to Su Ming's in terms of handsomeness. He carried in his hand a scarlet long sword which every expert present recognized. It was none other than the heart-killing sword. Considered to be the ultimate sword of killing by everyone, it nevertheless remained tame and calm in the person's hand. The footsteps of the man as he moved forward were steady, sonorous, and forceful. He only stopped walking when he had reached in front of the crowd of experts. Indeed, the heart-killing sword has recognized him as its owner. The experts gazed with complicated looks at Jian Wushuang. Since the fall of the sword ancestor, the heart-killing sword had never had a second owner. It had thus remained in the sword suppression valley for over 1,000 years, throughout which time there had been many sword principal experts who attempted to subdue it but ended up failing to do so. Su Ming, for instance, had made several attempts but was frustrated each time. The heart-killing sword finally got a new owner, but under the gaze of the experts, the aura on Jian Wushuang's body was impossible to conceal. It was, to everyone's surprise, the aura of a mere Saint Realm expert. A Saint Realm expert. His only a Saint Realm expert. He not only awakened 3 first-grade sword souls, but more inconceivably, fused them perfectly and metamorphosized them into an all-new sword soul such that even the heart-killing sword would voluntarily submit to him as its owner. To think he's only a Saint Realm expert. The sword principal experts were filled with sourness in their hearts, and many of them looked upon Jian Wushuang with great jealousy. Yes, it was jealousy. Jian Wushuang could sense the incoming envy upon him as well. Little Yuan, I believe your recognition of me as your owner is a good thing, but it has also brought me huge trouble. Looking at the sword in his hand, Jian Wushuang sighed lightly as his looks began to turn frosty. Chapter 487. Killing Intent. It was indeed huge trouble. As the first sword principal magic weapon of killing in the Divine Land, just how many people coveted it? Among this group of sword principal experts alone, 9 out of 10 were eager to obtain it, except that they did not have the capability to do so. And now, it had recognized Jian Wushuang as its owner right in front of them. How could they not be jealous and goggle-eyed? The strongest among these people are only of superior lord level. This poses no threat to me at present. There's only one person who's a serious threat to me. With chilly eyes, Jian Wushuang looked right over at Su Ming. The latter was standing upright in the void in his usual lofty pose. He too looked back at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang could vaguely detect the killing intent welling up in Su Ming's eyes despite their dull facade. Indeed. He laughed coldly. He was not in the least bit surprised. Su Ming had suppressed the heart-killing sword for over 1,000 years, throughout which he held a sword principal meeting every 100 years when the sword was in a state of agitation. Though this seemed to be an act of kindness, the reality was that deep down, Su Ming had long treated the sword as if it was his possession. .bg container 63275 CC1F display, flex direction, column align items, center justify content, center Z index, 214-748-3647. Important now that it had recognized Jian Wushuang as its owner instead, the real surprise would have been if Su Ming did not want to kill him. I'd planned to wait a little longer, when my strength has increased some, before taking him on. But it now seems that things have to be brought ahead. Jian Wushuang murmured to himself. Su Ming was a traitor of the bloodline of the sword ancestor. The decline of the bloodline was inextricably linked to Su Ming. As a descendant of the bloodline, it was Jian Wushuang's duty to clean things up on behalf of his ancestors if he had the strength to. It was only a matter of time before he challenged Su Ming. Now, the heart-killing sword had simply brought things forward by a little. The crowd of experts too looked at Su Ming in anticipation of his reaction. However, contrary to everyone's expectation, Su Ming did not fly into a rage. Instead, keeping his eyes on Jian Wushuang, he calmly asked, "Your Excellency's methods are truly awesome to have fused 3 sword souls into one. May I know thy name?" Jian Wushuang first thought about answering Swordsman when he heard Su Ming's inquiry, but after thinking for a bit, he replied, "My name is Jian Wushuang." Jian Wushuang. Su Ming muttered it in repeat. It literally means to have matchless sword principle. You certainly live up to such a fine name. False praise. Jian Wushuang was unflattered. That heart-killing sword has remained here in this valley for over 1,000 years. I'd tried many ways for it to recognize me as its owner but was never successful. Today, however, it has offered itself to Your Excellency, whose capability certainly puts mine to shame, Su Ming said. It was just luck, Jian Wushuang replied casually. Luck? Maybe. Su Ming's lips raised a corner. But after all, as the first sword principal magic weapon in the Divine Land, it has been eyed by many people. Your Excellency must be careful. Don't get killed so shortly after receiving it, or you mightn't even get to use it. Thanks so much for the tip, Master Su Ming. Jian Wushuang coolly acknowledged. All the best. Su Ming laughed callously, then turned and departed. The sword principal experts were astounded by what had they just seen. Gone? He left just like that. He didn't even try to seize back the sword? Is he really willing to let it fall into Jian Wushuang's hands? Willing? That's impossible. The entire Divine Land knows that Master Su Ming is crazy over the heart-killing sword, or he wouldn't have spent a good 1,000 years suppressing it. My view is that Master Su Ming chose not to act here to save face. This is the Sword Suppression Valley after all, and the fact is he'd personally invited Jian Wushuang here. Plus, the sword submitted itself to Jian Wushuang, who neither actively snatched it nor violated any of the valley's rules. It would be beneath Master Su Ming to tussle for the sword in the valley, and his reputation would be ruined if news spread. Of course, this only holds true in the valley. Things may be different outside. The experts chatted freely among themselves. Though they tried to keep their volumes down, Jian Wushuang could clearly hear what they were saying. In response, he laughed indifferently. He was certainly aware of the theory that Master Su Ming chose not to act outright here only so as to not tarnish his reputation, but would be unable to restrain himself once outside the valley. Inhaling a deep breath, Jian Wushuang kept the heart-killing sword in an interspatial ring before he slowly walked forward. Swordsman. Hunjian Lord and Tianming Lord were both looking at Jian Wushuang with somewhat complicated expressions. The two of you may leave first, Jian Wushuang said. Sorry, Swordsman. The two of us are of little help, Hunjian Lord said with some bitterness. I understand. Jian Wushuang nodded with genuine empathy. The person he needed to face this time was Su Ming, against whom even their leader Marquis Piaoxue, let alone them, was of no match. He walked up to Jian Nantian once again. The latter carried a flask of wine in his hand and was busy drinking to himself. His face was its usual indifference, and he only looked around when he saw Jian Wushuang coming toward him. I'd thought I'd caused enough trouble during my time, but it has turned out to be a lot less than what you've done. Father, stop teasing me. Jian Wushuang laughed mildly. Su Ming will certainly not let you off for taking the heart-killing sword. I fear that he'll try to murder you upon the very first step you take out of Sword Suppression Valley. Say, what are your plans? Jian Nantian uttered in a deep voice. What else can I do but take such measures as the situation calls for? The sword has already recognized me as its owner, and I surely cannot return it to him. Besides, it was originally the sword ancestor's magic weapon. Su Ming doesn't deserve to have it, Jian Wushuang responded. Of course, although he claimed he would simply take such measures as the situation called for, he did have a few plans deep down. At the very least, he had a life-saving trump card in his hand. You do seem to have quite the open mind. Jian Nantian glanced at his son and lowered his voice before continuing. I've already sent word for a helper to come forth. He'll need some time to get here, however. You just have to find a way to delay things a little. A helper? Jian Wushuang looked in puzzlement at his father. He was going to be acted upon by none other than one of the 9 sovereigns, Su Ming. What kind of helper would be able to stop such a person? Don't worry. The helper whom I asked for is very powerful and should have no problem stopping Su Ming. Jian Nantian laughed easily. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang could not help lifting his eyebrows. He might not have to resort to his final trump card if the helper was truly that capable. Incidentally, he did not really want to use that card. Chapter 488, Outside the Sword Suppression Valley. Ladies and gentlemen, the sword principal meeting is over and my lord has his own business to deal with, so I will have to ask you all to leave now, said the purple-clothed woman who had received the experts when they first arrived. The experts left the valley without hesitation after hearing those words. We're being asked to leave. It seems that they don't want us to stay any longer. Jian Wushuang smiled. Let's go, Jian Nantian said flatly. Then, he headed out of the valley with Jian Wushuang. The handsome Su Ming stood at the highest point of the valley, staring at Jian Wushuang's retreating figure off in the distance, with a twisted expression on his face. Zizhong. Su Ming spoke. Your Excellency. A purple-robed man came before him. Follow Jian Wushuang. Once he exits the valley, kill him and bring back the heart-killing sword, Su Ming ordered in a low voice. Yes, Your Excellency. The purple-robed man nodded respectfully and began following Jian Wushuang. The heart-killing sword is mine. No one can take it from me. Su Ming's eyes were as cold as ice. However, outside the valley, the experts had yet to walk away. Instead, they were waiting quietly. .bg container 63275 CC1F display, flex direction, column align items, center justify content, center Z index, 214-748-3647, important look, those two are Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu. Right outside the exit, stood 2 figures with vigorous auras. They were none other than the 2 marquises from earlier. The marquises were obviously waiting for Jian Nantian. They had wanted to kill Jian Nantian, but for fear of enraging Su Ming, they had waited until this moment, when everyone exited the valley. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian walked out the valley, side by side. They immediately attracted everyone's attention. They came out. Why are they together? Things have become interesting. If we kill Jian Nantian, we'll get 2 Dao weapons, one from Jian Nantian and one from Marquis Xiefeng. As for the Jian Wushuang, he's taken possession of the heart-killing sword and even combined 3 sword souls, which is the first time someone has achieved that in our entire history. He must have some big secrets. If we can kill him, we will learn a lot. The experts who were waiting watched Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian very closely. In their eyes, the 2 were like walking treasures and killing either one of them could benefit them a lot. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian spotted Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu just as they came out of the valley. They are waiting for you. Jian Wushuang cast Jian Nantian a meaningful eye. Just 2 shrimps, Jian Nantian said in a mocking tone. He despised the 2 marquises even though they were top experts in this land. How about each of us takes one of them? Jian Wushuang asked his father while smiling. His words showed that he did not take the marquises seriously. Fine. Jian Nantian nodded. I'll take Marquis Wanlei and you deal with Marquis Nanyu. No problem. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian charged toward their targets like 2 flowing lights. Their eyes were fixed on Jian Nantian, so Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu immediately rushed forward the moment they saw Jian Nantian move. Jian Nantian, go to hell. The bad-tempered Marquis Wanlei roared. Save your words. Jian Nantian remained indifferent. In the blink of an eye, the 2 forces were already within range for close combat. Marquis Nanyu, your opponent is me. Jian Wushuang's voice echoed. A blurry sword shadow stuck out, cutting through the space in front of Marquis Nanyu and forcing him to defend. Marquis Nanyu took out a saber that was surrounded by knife essence and casually blocked the sword shadow with it. "Boy, you dare to fight me?" Marquis Nanyu shot Jian Wushuang a chilling glance. The Marquis had witnessed how Jian Wushuang combined his 3 sword souls and gained the heart-killing sword, but he did not believe he was capable of possessing such a magic weapon. Therefore, he was not interested in Jian Wushuang or the heart-killing sword. "I've heard of the 72 marquises since I entered the Divine Land, but I haven't had a chance to battle a real Marquis until now," said Jian Wushuang with a smile. "Battle me? While you're only in the Saint Realm?" Marquis Nanyu glanced at Jian Wushuang with scorn in his eyes. Despite his excellent performance inside the valley, it didn't change the fact that Jian Wushuang was still in the Saint Realm. As for Marquis Nanyu, he was at the Seven Cloud Realm, so he thought that Jian Wushuang was insane to battle him. "Boy, since you're in a rush to die, I'll grant your wish and accept your heart-killing sword." As Marquis Nanyu's words fell, he turned into a shadow swish. Jian Wushuang only saw an elusive shadow flashing at a high speed, but he could feel a tempestuous killing intent surrounding him. He narrowed his eyes, ready to use the triple-kill sword that was already in his hand. A Marquis in the Seven Cloud Realm doesn't deserve to face the heart-killing sword. Jian Wushuang murmured. Behind him, a golden streak of light began to surge as a giant golden sword soul phantom materialized. The phantom, that was over 50 meters tall, appeared once again. An overwhelming sword essence immediately swept the area. If it had been before Jian Wushuang entered Sword Suppression Valley, he would have fled when facing a Marquis. However, things had changed in the valley. He had experienced the 1,000-sword salute and his power had skyrocketed. More than condensing 7 slaughter origin marks, he had also succeeded in combining his sword souls. He could tell that, even though he now only had 1 sword soul phantom, this golden phantom was more powerful than the previous 3 added together and could allow him to display even more power. "I can't wait to see how powerful my new sword soul is." Jian Wushuang licked his lips. The space in front of him was sliced open as Marquis Nanyu's saber drew near. Chapter 489. Killed on the Spot. The blow split the air, and before it even struck Jian Wushuang, its waves had already left a bottomless saber mark on the land below them. Jian Wushuang's eyes darkened as he leaped forward and swung the triple-kill sword at his opponent. The sword light was like a bolt of lightning that would continue moving forward until it struck its enemies. Jian Wushuang displayed the second move of the heart-killing sword technique, Desperation. The golden sword soul phantom that was behind Jian Wushuang also attacked at the same time. The power from his sword soul exploded forth. At the same time, the 7 slaughter origin marks were activated and released their full power. The sword light became as dazzling as the sun. Marquis Nanyu's killing intent continued increasing and his blow became even more fierce. "Die!" he growled hoarsely, with a grim look on his face. The two faced each other head-on, and they both used their full power. Neither one of them was taking it easy. Marquis Nanyu, as a Marquis in the Seven Cloud Realm, was quite confident about his power. He intended to defeat this insignificant opponent, who was only in the Saint Realm, using a single strike. .bg container 63275 CC1F display, flex direction, column align items, center justify content, center Z index, 214-748-3647. Important however, his opponent, Jian Wushuang, also had confidence in his strength. With only his 7 slaughter origin marks, he might be slightly inferior to Marquis Nanyu, but he also had the heavenly creation skill and a strong body to help make up the difference, as well as the heart-killing sword technique from the sword ancestor. Most importantly, he had his sword soul. He was backed by the power of the strongest sword soul. All added together, Jian Wushuang's attack was something that could shake the world. Boom! The 2 blows collided and the 2 formidable forces exploded. The whole area quivered as a visible blast wave swept over everything as it rippled out from the point of impact. It caused the sky to tremble and the ground to crack open. When the blast wave hit a mountain, the mountain was crushed into dust. "Step back." The experts who had been watching the battle from off in the distance drew back even farther when they saw the wave, afraid to unintentionally get involved. The whole battlefield was a surging storm of power. Swish! Suddenly, A figure shot out from the storm like a bullet. The figure kept rolling as he flew backwards, and didn't stop until he was hundreds of meters away. After regaining his balance, the figure's face flushed red, and he spat out a mouthful of blood onto the ground. Opposite the figure, a youthful figure walked out of the storm with a long sword in hand. The young figure was Jian Wushuang. "Your power doesn't live up to your name, Marquis Nanyu." His words resounded throughout the area. The onlookers were muddled by what they had seen. Marquis Nanyu was not weaker than them. How is this possible? I'm a Marquis, in the Seven Cloud realm. He is only in the Saint realm. How could I be overpowered by him when fighting head to head? He was completely overpowered. He had been knocked back hundreds of meters by that one strike and was injured to the point that he coughed up blood. But it should have been Jian Wushuang that was overpowered, not him. The result was totally beyond the Marquis's expectations. How could that boy defeat a Marquis? Confusion rocked everyone's mind. They were all in shock because they didn't know that Jian Wushuang was not just an ordinary expert in the Saint realm. His cultivation followed a path that defied the heavens with every step he took. A normal Saint realm expert would step into the Cloud realm after condensing 3 origin marks, but Jian Wushuang had condensed 7 origin marks, which was the same number of marks as Marquis Nanyu. The difference was that Jian Wushuang possessed origin marks while the Marquis had clouds, which were much more powerful. Jian Wushuang had overcome the difference by depending on the heavenly creation skill and his strong body. That was to say, even without his sword soul, Jian Wushuang still had a chance of beating Marquis Nanyu. But, by using it, he was able to overpower him. Jian Wushuang stood there, towering above him, holding a sword. As he pointed forward, a vast blood river flowed in that direction. Relying on his current power, he could cover the whole battlefield with road to the underworld. He displayed both the 100-fold realm and blood-fire domain at the same time. The 3 techniques worked together and suppressed Marquis Nanyu. Damn! Marquis Nanyu's expression changed. He was being suppressed by a mighty force and was not able to display his full power. He didn't do his best. Marquis Nanyu shot Jian Wushuang a horrified look, at which point he noticed a trace of killing intent in Jian Wushuang's eyes. The Marquis became frightened out of his wits. It never occurred to him that he would fear someone in the Saint realm to such an extent, but he was truly afraid. He knew that he was no match for Jian Wushuang. Run! Marquis Nanyu began to flee without any hesitation. He was too frightened to think of protecting his reputation. Regardless of whether it was fame, treasures, or Dao weapons, nothing mattered more than his life. You want to run away? You're running nowhere. Seeing Marquis Nanyu's intention, Jian Wushuang smiled coldly. With a flash, he left behind a shadow as he moved effortlessly through the blood river. It only took him an instant to catch up with Marquis Nanyu. Marquis Nanyu, go to hell. Indifferent words escaped Jian Wushuang's mouth, sentencing Marquis Nanyu to death. Marquis Nanyu turned around upon hearing the words and saw Jian Wushuang's sword flying towards him like lightning again. The sword was so fast that he knew he had no chance, even if he had not been suppressed by the realm technique. No! Marquis Nanyu screamed miserably before he was pierced by the triple kill sword. Marquis. Chapter 490. Enemies Arrive. Marquis Nanyu died with his eyes wide opened. His body fell from the air. The place was dead silent and the onlookers were stunned. A super expert in the Divine Land, one of the 72 Marquises, Marquis Nanyu, was killed before their very eyes, and it was done by a Saint Realm expert. A Saint Realm expert killed a Marquis with using his full power, and Marquis Nanyu couldn't even run away. Jian Wushuang is indeed powerful. I never thought there would be such a horrifying Saint Realm expert in the Divine Land. How could a Saint Realm expert be so strong? Everyone was completely shocked. However, before they could calm down, another daunting force exploded from a different battlefield. An enchanting sword shadow came into view and attracted everyone's attention. The attack was mysterious, and the power behind it reached its peak because of the Dao weapon. .bg container 63275 CC1F display, flex direction, column align items, center justify content, Center Z Index, 214-748-3647. Important Xianxia, who launched the attack, looked indifferent, but there was still a hint of killing intent gathered in his eyes. Shit. Marquis Wanlei, Xianxia's opponent, turned pale when he saw the attack, but he still tried to block it. However, Xianxia's sword still knocked his giant axe away and pierced straight through him. Marquis Wanlei had been killed as well. He died because he had underestimated Xianxia. He didn't know that before the 1,000 sword salute took place, Xianxia had already killed a superior lord and 2 advanced lords with a single blow. At that time, he was already as powerful as an ordinary marquis. With a great opportunity like the 1,000 sword salute, it was only natural that Xianxia had progressed a lot. Besides that, Xianxia had stepped into the 7-cloud realm, he possessed excellent swordsmanship, and he also had a Dao weapon. Thus, he was definitely much more powerful than Marquis Wanlei. In such a short amount of time, both Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu had been killed. However, Jian Wushuang and Xianxia did not appear to be proud. They knew very well that the 2 marquises were just ordinary 7-cloud realm experts without any Dao weapons. They regarded them as shrimps and had not taken them seriously from the very beginning. The one behind the 2 was their real concern. He's here. Xianxia's dark eyes turned towards the sky, where a figure off in the distance was slowly becoming more and more clear. Behind the figure was a large red cloud. A moment later, the figure finally arrived in front of Xianxia. The figure wore a red robe and had red hair. He carried a blood-red saber on his back and turbulent red clouds following behind him. Standing there, he seemed like an Asura from the hell. Xianxia. The figure's eyes were fixed on Xianxia with a barely suppressed killing intent in them. Marquis Xiefeng, Xianxia replied calmly. The figure, Marquis Xiefeng, was extremely powerful and had been chasing after Xianxia during these last few days. He even offered a Dao weapon to anyone who could kill Xianxia. Being ranked within the top 2 among the 72 marquises in the Divine Land demonstrated how powerful he was. The dead Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu were marquises as well, but they were no match for Marquis Xiefeng. Marquis Xiefeng appeared on the battlefield with a killing intent that was so overwhelming the onlookers could not help holding their breath. The Marquis looked down at Marquis Wanlei's dead body. It seems that your power increased substantially during the meeting. You were even able to kill Wanlei, Marquis Xiefeng said icily. However, I still look down on you, and you will see how miserably the murderer of my sworn brothers will end. Really? Show me then. Xianxia stared at Marquis Xiefeng calmly. You're courting death. Without wasting any more words, Marquis Xiefeng began to move forward and the turbulent red cloud that filled sky behind him moved forward as well. 3 sword soul phantoms shot up behind Xianxia and rushed towards the Marquis while radiating an overwhelming sword essence. Marquis Xiefeng. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes while watching the scene taking place in front of him. Marquis Xiefeng is in the 8-cloud realm and possesses a Dao weapon. He is much more powerful than Wanlei. I hope Father can deal with him. Jian Wushuang was lost in thought when a purple streak of flowing light suddenly emerged in front of him. Hey! Jian Wushuang looked toward the light and realized it was a man. He was a burly man, clothed in purple. His grand aura revealed his identity as a marquis, one that was more powerful than Marquis Nanyu. He is Marquis Zizhong. Someone recognized the man and called out his name in surprise. Marquis Zizhong was a top marquis among the 72 marquises in the Divine Land. He was also in the 8-cloud realm, and he even possessed a Dao weapon, so he was just a little bit weaker than Marquis Xiefeng. Jian Wushuang. Marquis Zizhong looked toward Jian Wushuang as his frigid voice echoed, "Give me the heart-killing sword and I'll spare your life." Spare my life? Don't talk like you can kill me. Marquis Zizhong, you don't have the ability to take my life, so tell your boss to come out and do it himself, Jian Wushuang said with a sneer. Jian Wushuang knew very well that Marquis Zizhong was trying to seize the heart-killing sword under someone's order. There was no doubt that the person who gave him the order was Su Ming. No need to call anyone else. I can kill you on my own. Marquis Zizhong's expression was ice-cold as he gripped the cyan long spear in his hand, the head of which was sharp and gleamed with a metallic luster. Marquis Zizhong made a sudden move and the spear pierced through the air, approaching Jian Wushuang. So fast! Jian Wushuang frowned, but his eyes were filled with battle intent. Good. Since you want to fight, let's fight.